Hey there, and welcome into University of Hoops, the show that takes you behind the scenes of your favorite basketball team. I'm Blake Atwell, and today we are very excited to welcome UCSD assistant coach Sam Stapleton. Coach, welcome to the show.
Blake, thank you for having me. And Sean, thank you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely don't want to forget our producer, Sean, for booking the guests, making it all happen. We are excited to talk to you because you are somebody that's been very entrenched in the SoCal basketball world for pretty much your whole career, which, of course, as everybody knows, that's in this business is a real hotbed for talent. So excited to touch on all of that. Before we get to that, though, just wanted to give you a chance to talk about and tell the viewers and listeners what your sort of day to day is like as an assistant coach at the D1 level at UCSD. And obviously, school coming back right now, the season around the corner, just what that day to day looks like.
Yeah, we're a little unique in terms of we're in the quarter system. So right now we're kind of in our final week of summer. We have our guys coming back on Wednesday. And then we won't even start school back until last week of September. So we're probably a little behind a lot of other programs right now, but looking ahead to what that day to day will look like. As you guys know, it'll be way more than the time you spend on the court, right? You get the 2 hours of practice, but um, right, we'll all have our own academic teams, making sure guys are in the right classes. And then we got recruiting coming up. September 4th is the first day that D1 coaches can be out, and I think we're kind of in the final process of finalizing where our head coach will be, who we want to bring on an official visit. So those are a couple of the priorities right now. And then obviously when we got our team back, we got the 20 hour or 8 hours a week on the court until the final week of September where we hit the 20 hours and then we're going full force from there.
Once you are in sort of that full force mode, what does a game day look like for you?
Uh, well, there are two scenarios. One, is it my scout? If it's my scout, I'm probably stressing and going through every baseline out of bounds one more time, every ATO, trying to find any little detail that maybe I missed on in the preparation leading up. If it's not my scout, it might be getting a workout in before shoot around with a player. Um, More than anything, though, right? Like we tell our players, you're trying to put yourself in the right mindset. 7 p.m. games might be a little different than a 1 p.m. game. But game days are fun. Game days are where you've let the preparation take over. There's not a whole lot you could do at that point. Now you hope that you recruited the right type of guys, you coach them up, and now you put them in right spot, a right situation to be successful.
Speaking of recruiting, coach, what is it like being in the SoCal market, if you will, and competing against these other schools and finding talent where there is so much of it? And how do you know whether a guy is a right fit for what you guys are building at UCSD?
Yeah, I think the number one, the academic part will filter out itself. We're not recruiting every kid in the country because number one, academically we can't. So we let the academic part kind of filter out. We try to get on high school kids pretty early, knowing what their GPA might be going into their 10th grade year, 11th grade year at the latest. So by the time they're going to their junior year, we have a pretty good idea on who we could recruit and who we can academically. And then the second filtering process is our style of play. We're very unique in how we play. We'll pass up on a ton of guys who are very talented and will definitely end up playing in the Big West, who we feel pretty confident wouldn't be great in our system. So right there, those two filtering processes, academically and style of play. After that, you have a pretty good idea for who you want to spend time on, who you want to put resources into, and then you got to have a good awareness and a good pulse on. All right, you talked about competing. I love that word, but are we wasting our time, quote unquote, competing against a high major where that kid is their number one priority, or have I done my homework where all right, there might be high major recruiting him, but they got 3 or 4 guys ahead of him, knowing that in the end, that kid might come back down to our level. I'm going to keep competing, keep working at him. Um, so yeah, it's a combination of knowing the type of guys that do really well in your program and at your university, and then competing for them.
Coach Scope Scouting is a new player evaluation brand that's helping players get some attention and get looks and get in the door at programs like UCSD. When Scope is in the building at these high school tournaments and a UCSD coach is in attendance, what can a player do to sort of make that connection and catch a coach's eye, you think?
Yeah, I think number one, going back to the academic part, right? If I see a kid who I randomly like, first thing I do is pull up their Twitter, see if they have their GPA in their profile. Uh, and again, you don't take, 3.5 could go either way. 3.5 can mean 3.75 or it can mean 3.25, but at least it gives you an idea. And then you follow up with their high school coach to confirm that. So that would be number one academically. And then number two, right, all the cliches of being a good teammate, being coachable, having a competitive edge. I love going to a game and not letting the kid know I'm going to be there because I like to see how they naturally and organically play. If I tell the kid I'm coming, that could go one of two ways. Maybe they try really hard and don't play their best, or maybe they try really hard where in other cases they wouldn't. So I like to see them in a very organic setting. I like to see them when they're not playing their best. How can they impact the game, right? If they're a 30-point per game guy, the odds of that being their day one role at college, probably not going to be great. They're probably going to have to find other ways to impact the game. So, I could tell if the guy's a shooter, he might go 0 for 10, but if they're running plays for him to get a 3-point shot off, I'm not going to let that 0 for 10 completely, I would hope he would make a couple, but the fact that he got the volume up and they're running stuff for him, okay, I'll get a better sample size, but can he guard on the other end? Is he willing to make his team and his teammates better?
Coach, quick follow up about Scope as well. How can a service like that help you guys when you're going over all of the traits that you just mentioned and trying to sift through who's a fit and who's not a fit?
Yeah, I think again, going back to the filtering out process, right? I'm not expecting Scope to hand deliver a player to me, but if they could help get me in the right direction where again, I'm not wasting my time with a kid who might not fit our GPA requirement, or they could tell me, hey, there's a big man here, but he doesn't fit your style of play. Again, if I could really filter, and now I have a resource that helps me put my time and again, our time is limited, and even more than my time, my head coach's time is limited. So if I'm having to go watch a player, recruit a player, I want to feel pretty good that they're a fit on and off the court. So I think being able to help with that filtering out process, I think the personal connection to it, right? Where, I'm not having to deal with 10 different people, but I have the same contact every single time. And now they know our program specifically. I think that personal factor that yeah, going back to the filtering out process, I think that's a big deal for us.
Absolutely. Shifting the focus a little bit to UCSD and what you guys did as a program last year and sort of where you're headed. A big winning increase from the season before. Lots of excitement heading into this season. How do you guys keep that momentum going, and what are you the most excited about for the upcoming year?
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is finally being postseason eligible. I think we're in a very unique situation where, right, we're obviously playing to win, but we do know at the end of the year we didn't quite have that uh ultimate prize to really look forward to. And we've been building our team to be really good in this 24-25 year first season being postseason eligible. So I think that right there's a ton of excitement on campus. Made recruiting a lot easier, right? It could always be hard to tell a kid, hey, we really like you, but can't play in the NCAA tournament. But you want to recruit guys that care about that and believe they could be that missing piece. And then, I think number one, a way to get to that is, today's day and age, trying to retain your player, trying to have that, guys in year two in our program do really well. So we're excited about the few guys we have coming back who were impactful last year and now are going to have another year to really grow in our program. So yeah, I think there's a ton to be excited about. It's really hard to win us anywhere. But I think we have a great foundation, and we're looking to play an NCAA tournament this year.
March Madness coach. Looking forward to it. Excited for you guys as well. Now I want to get into more about your story and the places you've been and just kind of how you've gotten to where you are today in the basketball business. Speaking of which, just take us back to the beginning. How did you, fall in love with the game and take us through each of your stops that you've been at and just give the viewers and the listeners a dose of how you made it to where you are today.
Yeah. I have no idea how I fell in love with the game. Mom and dad had no background, no basketball background at all. One of the things where you just start playing in a park league in Hawaii, and you have your friend's dad kind of will influence you a little bit, and from there you find a love for the game. And I knew very early on, oddly enough, I had more of a passion for coaching than for playing. Like even I'm talking about 9, 10 years old. I was a really weird kid who I knew I wanted to be D1 coach one day. Part of that might have been knowing that I might not be good enough, and I probably wouldn't be good enough to play in the NBA or play professionally. But I had a passion for the coaching part of it, and I knew right away after I was done playing. Even when I played, I played at a D3 Occidental, and in the summers I would coach with the former club program I played for, LA Rockfish, knowing that that'd be a good way to get my foot in the door, start building my network. So right after graduating from Occidental, got lucky enough to be an assistant at the JUCO level at West Los Angeles JC for 2 years. And then a grad assistant at Pepperdine for 2 years, and then went to the D2 level at Cal State Dominguez Hills for 4 years. And now I'm going into my fourth year, if I'm not mistaken, at UC San Diego. And then every stop has been a random fate of running into somebody. For example, being a grad assistant at Pepperdine, there's an assistant there, John Impleman. He played at Occidental. We never overlapped. I had never met him. I had heard the name though. I ran into him at a AU tournament one day, told him I was looking for a grad assistant opportunity or if he could help me at all. And oddly enough, a week later he called me and told me they had an opportunity, and from there, it kind of worked out from one stop to another.
That's awesome, coach. And I know that you've sort of been elevated a couple times at UCSD. Talk to us more about that, since you got in the program, what that process has been like for you in terms of climbing that ladder.
Yeah, I think part of it, or a lot of it, is believing in your ability, right? We talked about the type of guys we recruit who hopefully they want to be the best. And um, number one, I believed in the program at UC San Diego. We played against when I was at Cal State Dominguez Hills when UC San Diego was still D2. I saw the powerhouse they were. I knew when they were going D1. I had no doubt they were going to do what they did at the D1 level, same thing that they did at the D2 level. Wanted to be a part of it, wanted to get in early, even knowing the transition and not being postseason eligible. So I think part of it was willing to move up in a program where I believed in what they were doing. I believed in the head coach, Eric Olin. So that was part of it, right? Like, you're doing a lot of thankless jobs. And I think if you're doing it for a boss or a program where you don't believe in what they're doing or you don't agree with how they do it, uh, that likelihood of number one, moving up, and more than anything, having the patience and the willingness to wait it out, I think is a lot less if you're doing it for people you don't believe in a program you don't believe in. So it's been great. It's been something that happened organically. I always had a really big passion for the recruiting part of it, and I think Coach Olin identified that really early, and he's given me a ton of opportunity to really flourish in that regard.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, coach, in terms of these different stops that you've had, and you mentioned West LA, you mentioned Pepperdine, of course, now at UCSD. Who have some of your biggest coaching mentors been, and how have they influenced you? And what are some of those best pieces of advice that they've lended you along the way, would you say?
Yeah. It's funny when I talk about mentor, I don't think I have one, but I think you have different pieces of different people, right, that you've been around. I talked about the AU program, LA Rockfish, the founder, Dave Benezra, again, gave me kind of that first opportunity to get my feet wet, get my foot in the door. And he's been very impactful. Number one, with his advice, and number two, he has his own network of uh, Division I coaches, head coaches, assistants. So that right there, I think Dave is definitely a big part. I talked about John Implement at Pepperdine. He's been somebody who, even now with him being out of the business, me and him talk every day, and I'm able to bounce ideas off of him, get his advice for if he were me, how he would do something. So those are definitely a couple. And then again, you take a ton of different pieces from people you work for. When I was a grad assistant at Pepperdine, I see myself doing a ton of stuff that those assistant coaches were doing and how they did it, how they would talk to a kid on the phone. My former boss at Cal State Dominguez Hills, Steve Becker, me and him spend a lot of time together. Again, at the D2 level, you don't have 4 or 5 coaches on staff. So I think being able to learn from him, and I think that's played a big part in my career. Chris Acker, who was my head coach at West LA JC. He's now the head coach at Long Beach State. So he comes from the Rick Roy tree where, really competitive. Uh, um, they have the whole win forever saying going for them. So yeah, I think at every stop I've taken a couple things here and there from all my bosses, from people I've worked for, worked under, and I think that's helped form who I am today.
With all of those lessons and that advice that you have internalized along the way, for somebody that wants to break into the biz, what would your best advice to them be?
I don't think there's a perfect piece of advice, right? I think when people talk about every path is different, I truly believe that. Again, for me, I was a former player at the D3 level. I wouldn't say that necessarily, helped a ton in terms of being able to break into the business, or at least at the Division I level. Although it did help me get a grad assistant spot at Pepperdine. A former player at the Division I level might have a different path. I think more than anything, it's about treating people right, working hard. There's gonna be a lot of times where you tend to almost stop believing in yourself. Um, so in the moment, you go for a job and you don't get it, or something doesn't go right, it could be really easy to want to move on to a different job, to a different path. But I do tell people all the time, coaching is more than anything, I believe, where you got to have both feet in and you can't have a backup plan. I think if you are willing to have a backup plan, then there's always going to be a day where you do stuff that maybe you don't love, or maybe it might not be, a ton of fun. And you could be like, I might as well go to a 9 to 5, probably get paid a little more, probably have a little more stability, being able to have weekends, being able to have a 3-day weekend, talking about Labor Day here. But for me, I was fully committed to making it work. I had a great support system. I had parents who were willing to let me live at home when I worked at the JC level early on. I have a very supportive now wife for, I think, 23 days now. I could call her my wife. But I think having people around you who understand the world and get it, and realize that you're doing more than rolling out a ball and blowing a whistle for 2 hours a day, but you are really on the clock all the time. But the reward definitely outweighs any negative part of it.
Congrats on the wedding, coach. That's huge.
Thank you.
Sounds like everything went well.
Yeah, yeah, everything went great. Yeah, we had a great time.
Good, good. I'm glad. That's awesome. And that's, that's the coolest part about all this is just being able to move up in the world with the people that you care about and the people that help you sort of advance. So that's awesome. Um, Coach, if you could look back at the way that your journey has played out, you mentioned how, you were a D3 player, a guy who played D1 is going to have a totally different set of like advantages and disadvantages. For you, if you could go back and do something differently, what would that be? And the reason that I ask this is because for all of the sort of different sets of situations there's always somebody out there that's similar to you in one way or another.
It's funny, if I could do anything differently, I don't think there'd be one thing that would come to mind. Uh, I think the way everything has played out has been perfect. I think the levels I've been at, right at the JUCO level, you're like you don't have a ton of help, ton of support around you. You're really figuring it out on the fly. As a grad assistant at the D1 level, you're really a fly on the wall. And you're really getting to see, maybe you're not the kid, you're not closing the deal on a kid, but you're right there all every step of the way. And knowing that when you do get put in that position, rather than thinking how a phone call should be made, like I've seen three, four guys, five guys, that have been doing it for a long time, and really identifying and evaluating what worked for them at the D2 level. It's a little bit of that JUCO part of it where you don't have a ton of people on staff and you're doing everything. You're running study hall. You got to learn how to read a transcript. You got to learn how to deal with financial aid. And I think all that has led me to hopefully being good at what I'm doing now. Because maybe I don't have to do every single thing I did at the other levels, but I'm capable of doing it if need be, right? And I'm able to bring value in other ways, along with on the court, but off the court. Again, a big part of recruiting is for at UC San Diego is identifying um, who could fit academically. So reading a transcript and um, it's definitely a big part of it. And you still have other people in the athletic department who can give you the final say on that, but at least being able to figure out they're either definitely good enough or definitely not good enough academically. Now you're not wasting time of your head coach and your boss. So again, looking back at it, I'm really glad how everything worked out. There's nothing comes to mind of one thing I would want to happen differently. There's been jobs I've got or I've gone for that I didn't end up getting, and looking back at it, it ended up being the best thing that ever could happen to me. And in the moment, it could have been a little frustrating and demoralizing. And now looking at where I am now, and hopefully where I could continue to get to and continue to grow, I really feel like everything happened for a reason.
What's your why, Coach, behind, why you've stayed in the business through the ups and downs of your journey?
I think there's multiple. The one that comes to mind is the reward when you're working with a student athlete. And that can mean anything. That can mean, right, you're helping them work on their shot and you spend time in the gym and then they make a big three in a big game. That moment where they come over and they know that you were in there really grinding with them, on the other end of it, again, going back to at Cal State Dominguez Hills, where maybe you had a student athlete who might have been a first generation college student, and academically they had a tough time and they found a way to graduate. Moments like that I think are really rewarding. So I think all encompassing all, the outcome you get from putting in the time with a student athlete and seeing the reward for them. And I think that is a big reminder for why we do that, right? We could let the wins and losses dictate a lot. And I think, the higher level you get to, that becomes more and more important. But even with that, I think the impact you can make on an 18 to 22, 18 to 23-year-old. And you have to be reminded of that every now and then, right? When you're in the day-to-day part of it, again, you're recruiting, trying to find the best people, the best player that could fit in your system. But you do tell their parents that, you know, you're going to be there when they graduate. And when that really happens, that is a great reminder for why we and why I do what I do.
Coach, what are some of your long-term aspirations in the business? I know you've had several different accomplishments along the way right now, and of course, you're at a D1 stop at the moment. What are your some of the things that you still want to check off that list?
Um, I mean, I think like anybody or like most people you probably talk to, definitely want to be a head coach one day. Um, and I want to put myself in a position where if and when that ever did happen, people say all the time you're never fully ready, but I'd like to be as prepared as possible. And I think that comes from learning from people who are really good at what they do. And again, I'm in a pretty fortunate position to do that with Coach Olin, who's proven it at literally multiple levels, D2 level, now the D1 level. Um, and I hope to continue to grow to where if and when that opportunity came, uh, I'd be ready. I'd be ready to go. And I love the mid-major level. I've never really had the aspirations to be coaching in the NBA or coaching at a blue blood. I love the levels where you're able to have guys in your program for 2, 3, hopefully 4 years and see them grow, see them develop. Um, I think there's politics attached at every level, but I don't think there's any secret. The higher you go, there's probably more and more. Um, so I really love the level I'm at, the Big West level, the that mid-major level, and I think ultimately continue to prepare myself and surround myself with people who can help prepare me to be a head coach one day.
UCSD assistant coach Sam Stapleton. Coach, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, Blake, thank you. Sean, thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our viewers and our listeners for tuning into another episode of University of Hoops, taking you behind the scenes of your favorite basketball team every single week with great interviews just like this one, with Coach Stapleton. Stay tuned for another show dropping next week.